So we're getting into emailing now with PHP, and you just want to see the previous video for details about making sure you have that mail server up and how to use the email addresses to test this locally. Server side's not going to be much of a problem, and we'll get into it now. We have just the form here that you can deal with. If we select this selection list, we can see that we go to different pages. The default is to go to Process Email 2, and Process Email 3 are intermediate and advanced. Really just a little bit more advanced than the simple way of doing it, and I'll show you how to do that. These are in the scripts folder within that section, within the website interactivity. We just pass that along, and we really don't even have to look at it anymore. The data itself is updated in those form fields as we're used to. At the top we do that, and you can change that to be whatever you want there. This is just a dummy email address, but change it to something that's local or something that you're going to be using that's connected to the server, mail server, to get it done. And make sure you put in your proper fields there in that file as I explained already. So process email. We're going to take the post variables, fname, lname, the email address, company name, subject, phone, and message. And these are going to be grabbed from the post. We don't worry about any add slashes at this point. You can do that. Definitely check your variables using some validations to make sure you're not getting any bogus data that might interfere with anything that you're going to be putting into the database or anything in general. All we do in this simple example is construct a string using the dot equals to add each line here. They're all separate lines, but this is one way to add it in an organized way. We have the first name. We write out just a nice email, and we have the \n as new lines here in order to get to the new line to format things correctly. And you just use some formatting techniques to get your email address to look nice. And here's an example, one example, and you can just send yourself some emails, and then you can see how this is looking really nice and formatted. And you can also see the hello, welcome, and then the best regards, as well as any data inside there that you want to pass back, and links and things like that. You can put HTML in there, and it looks really nice. It looks nice when you're able to do that. There are advanced ways to do things, like newsletters, for example, and you can check that out. There are a few open source solutions for that as well. We're not going to pass anything into the database. We're just going to send an email. And you can see that we have a message here that's going to be word wrapping if we were actually to use this. This is called mail here. So we're not dealing with the message. It's just an example. If you want to eliminate word wrap, you would change that to mail or any of the fields where you want to worry about word wrapping. Look up that function, and it's a pretty cool function that you can work with. But I didn't actually add it into here. You can experiment with that. And then all we do is call the mail here, the mail function. This is going to have the email address, comma separated with the subject, the mail message that's here that you want to send, and where it's coming from. Now notice that I use the session app server, info@app server, and grab the app server directly from that variable that I had in the session. Like I said, you want to set that up. I did mention that at the beginning of this video, and if you want to take a peek at that, just open or refresh that, rewind that to that point, or watch the previous video. And you can just put any email address that's going to be a from, as long as it's a valid email address that can work with the mail server that you have specified in those session variables as well. I just do it a little tricky way here, no big deal. And then to get this mail to output here in the form, when we take a look at it in HTML, we do a string replace to get rid of those carriage returns here, \ns, the escape characters that we're used to, and we just put in a BR there, a hard break. And that lets it format it nicely for us, and we can see that when we take a peek at the form. Simple or the default, not a big deal. We'll put in an email address, and we'll leave everything else the same. You can see it's sample data, and then we'll hit send in your comments. Like I said, it can take a few seconds here, and we can see that this is not going to take that there. That's because I put in the wrong email address, and this is a warning. And I'll show you something else that you can take into consideration. On an invalid email address, it's going to come back with that particular error. And I did mention before that you can put the @ sign in front of your functions here so you can suppress a warning. And that way you don't have to see something like that. And we'll see that in other examples. And you can see that it doesn't give you that warning. You would have to process that inside that page based on some of the error processing routines and things I've mentioned. But you can see now it's not going to actually show that warning, which is a bad thing. So people give you bogus email addresses all the time. So this is a way to suppress that warning message if you use the regular mail way of doing things. That's something to look out for. So I'll leave it off there so you can do the same thing. But then you can check your mail and see if that came in based on your mail settings there. And then you can see that this is how the email is going to look. It looks very similar. It's in HTML. We have hard breaks, and it looks pretty nice. It looks almost like the email address that I did show you. Now we can try the intermediate. You can go back that way, or you can just hit the back button. That helps too, because we already have the email address in there, and this time we're going to not send a bad email address. And there it went through again. The message formatted a little bit different, and we'll see how this one looks. That would be the process email 2. Notice that that require is up there for the include and require. You have to check out the section for working with that in the functions section. Same thing with the variables. Grab the post, no difference there. Server name is the app server name, as you can see here. We just specified as a variable. We have carriage return and line feeds, both of those now. Sometimes you need both, depends on what system you're working with. Again, the word wrap. Here we're having the headers go out. We can put headers in here, additional header information. Check out that mail function. It's pretty powerful. It has a lot of functionality. So here we're specifying the headers separately instead of just, as we did before, we were specifying headers, but we only did it with the from. Just one. Now we're adding with carriage return line feed, we're adding a reply to, another email address, and then we're adding the PHP version Xmailer information. You can look that up as well. It's just showing you that you can make robust headers here to do some really great things. And then we do a string replace on the mail and a string replace on the headers, and we echo that out later on below. But this is important, the mail. Again, use that @ if you want to eliminate any warnings that are going to come up for that function and any function that might break your code. But that's the second version. The third version is very, very similar, except we're putting an HTML formatted item here, as you can see. This is HTML. It's a string that's on separate lines. This is a nice way to format things. You can also include a file that has special formatting like this. If you're coming from ASP, you might have come from a bad experience where you have to do a whole bunch of response.writes and construct your strings in a different way. PHP allows you to add the string very nice, very neat. It looks like straight HTML, and it is, except for these little quotes, dots, and the fields that we're going to put in there. So you can get the idea with that. And even more information here. We have a MIME type, the content type here. This is so we can pass HTML in the mail. We have a header that's much more detailed, to, from, CC, blind CC, and then an Xmailer as well that is putting out the PHP version. Things that you could add in the headers. And then again, the @ sign. This is a different way to check for did this mail succeed or not. If this is not successful and you suppress the warnings, this is how you would do that. Not and suppress the warnings, both in one little go. If statement, then you exit. Well, you can also echo things out, make it look better for HTML, send it to an error page, do whatever you feel is necessary, and otherwise it's going to actually just echo out that information there for us. And again, it is a HTML message, so we want to be careful about having duplicate HTML tags in there. But we can just process the advanced, all the same information. And look, we're just going to echo out the MIME types there, the header, the content type here, all that's echoed out here. So that's working with your email. You can take a look at those emails as they come into your mailbox Again, you want to make sure that you're using something locally that you can work with. You could have an SMTP server locally. You can use something remotely, but you run into problems when you try to use it as a gateway. That's really up to you to set that up. If you have problems, you want to actually use your server while you actually process this information. And you can actually get a really cheap provider for, sometimes you get the 30 days for free, just like software. And oftentimes you can get something for $4.95 to $7.95 a month and up, of course. And then you can test these out on a remote server instead of worrying about setting things up locally, as you wish.